Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the FitFam podcast. Today, super exciting.
What is life force and how do you get more? Give me more of it.
Give me more of it. We're going to get into that. As always, this is Miss Natural Olympia, Hilary.
And this is Doug, the Formulator.
And always remember that you have that little button down there that you can click to subscribe. Please do that. We love that and love when you give comments about the shows and let us know even other topics, because health, being holistic health, there's a lot to it. And so we want to make sure we give what you want.
Absolutely. There's a lot to it, and we've covered a lot. And so sometimes people go back, watch an episode, and they're like, you know what? If you gave me a little bit more of that, that would be awesome. So we even like that.
And that's what we're
Do
going to
all
do a
the
little bit
things.
today, right? We were talking about one of the main things that cause low energy, cause fatigue, disease, shortening of lifespan, accelerated aging. And really, it was crazy because it was like stress,
Right.
but not just stress, constant stress.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And what does stress do? It kind of depletes us of some specific thing within the body.
Absolutely. Enzymes.
I remember the first time that I learned about enzymes decades ago, and I had learned a little bit about them, this guy, and then learned a little bit more and learned a little bit more. And then all of a sudden, one time it just clicked and all of the ins and outs. And I swear, once it clicks, everybody will just love enzymes and
Well, it changes everything.
changes
Right?
everything.
The way you look at everything.
Yeah.
And, one thing that's important with stress is a lot of people think, I want to live this absolute, completely stress-free life. Then I'm going to have the most energy, vitality, longevity. Now, that's not true. That's not true at all. In fact, you want little stressors constantly throughout your life. What do you mean constantly? Stress, no stress. Stress, no stress. Because that's where growth comes. You can even take it back to birth.
Yeah.
A C-section has less stress on the baby, but the immune system is much lower than going through a little bit of the stress of going through the canal and dealing with bacteria and that and building the immune system. Same holds true with everything, right? Building muscle, your character, everything. You need those stress. But the things that cause constant stress, you allow your mind to make up stories. You constantly have a stress because of digestion. You constantly have stress because of people you're around that are negative. All of these constant stresses in your life is what causes disease.
Yeah, there's a positive stress and there's a negative stress, and we should all be seeking and searching for more positive stressors in our life. And you know it's a positive stressor when you come out on the other end better. If on the other end of it you feel worse, well, there might have been an issue with that stressor.
Absolutely. And the key is with stress is that the research shows the shorter the stress, the better. In other words, in and out, right? Working out's probably the greatest. Man, it hurts, you're stressing, and immediately you're out.
Yeah,
Okay.
or an ice bath. That's a really great example.
That's a great example. So when it comes to even looking at other areas of life, and even if you disagree with someone, get in, get out, right? You solve it quickly. You don't go to bed mad. All of these things are so true because it's the constant stress.
I know you've become such a good apologizer.
Yeah, it helps a lot, even when it's not true.
Oh, it's always true.
Always true.
Anyways, okay, so let's get into the 3 different types of enzymes and kind of touch on all 3. And
yeah, I love that because we focus on one so much at Optimal Health Systems, but really, I think, as you talked about, where's that trigger where you really understand enzymes like, wow, that's why it's an important part of my life. It's knowing the 3.
Right. So give us the first and their definition. Like, help us understand before we get started enzymes in general.
All right. So enzymes are molecules, protein molecules that create reactions, and reactions don't exist without them. That's a simple answer to it. So think about it. No reaction exists unless enzymes do it. If there wasn't enzymes, everything would be slow. It would take millions of years for any reaction to happen in the body at all. So there's 3 types of enzymes. Metabolic enzymes are the key. Metabolic enzymes are the one that runs every internal process of the body, all energy production, all nutrients being circulated, all coughing, sneezing, all of that happens. But it's enzymes are what make your organs and the cells, the mitochondria, work. Without them, they wouldn't be able to function. So metabolic enzymes are the key.
Okay.
Maybe a good way to explain that is when we're looking at blood work, we look at liver enzymes. Some Enzymes, when they're elevated, mean things are working too high. And that's what we're looking at the liver. ALT, AST are just enzymes in the liver, but when they're elevated, that means that the liver's working too much. So
It's
enzymes
too
are
stressed.
too stressed. Boom.
Boom.
So metabolic enzymes, number one.
Okay.
Number two is digestive enzymes. Now, digestive enzymes, we're talking about the ones that the body makes,
Okay.
right? And so inside the body, in the pancreas, there's enzymes that are secreted when we eat food, and the body says, hey, we need X amount of enzymes to digest that food. Let's send the protein digestive enzymes, trypsin in there. Let's send the fat digestive enzymes, and that, based on the food you ate and how much it needs to produce. Now, digestive enzymes weren't meant to be used very much. You're
Mm.
supposed to digest your food and not put much stress on the pancreas.
Because you were supposed to eat far more raw foods that contain their own enzymes.
And
We're
that's the
working right
third.
into the third one
Boom,
here.
good one there. Transition.
Yeah,
Plant
thanks.
enzymes.
Plant enzymes. So your body was meant to take in many, many, many raw enzymes, which have their own enzymes present so that they digest themselves down, right?
Yep.
And so that the body didn't have to support digestion as much as it does.
That's it. Every food in nature, every single food, bar none, in its raw state contains these enzymes, so that when you eat that food and you chew it, you have to release the enzymes. Then that food will pre-digest and digest itself all the way to the nutrients that the body needs, and that's the key. Anytime that doesn't happen, your body's pancreatic enzymes, body's digestive enzymes have to come in to do the job, and it causes stress on the system.
Right. So that's why every time you eat a really highly processed cooked meal, so let's kind of think about it in stages here. Not only do you eat a meal that is cooked, so it's void of all of its own enzymes to digest itself down, you eat a food that has a lot of other processed ingredients, and so it just compounds the toxic effect on the body. So the body's trying to deal with all these toxins and this food that is void of enzymes. So it just puts so much stress on the body to be able to break it down. And that is why after you eat a large meal that is void of enzymes, you feel so tired because your body's working so hard. It's no longer, you know, digestion becomes the priority. So
yeah, and remember, digestion is a priority. That's a really good point. Is if you don't digest your food, you get that disease that no one likes called death, right? We die.
the death disease.
The death disease. And because your body doesn't want to die, it will take away from every other process to digest that food. So like you said, if you eat a meal highly processed or a whole bunch of calories, your body will shut down everything else. That's why you have a food coma. It's real. You want to lay down because the body says nothing else is more important than digesting that food. Once you understand that, it changes the ball game. And we have a good friend. We were just filming for the documentary, The Great American Food Fraud, right? Russell Brunson's there, blew our minds. Can't wait to see a documentary, what he had to say. But a good friend of ours that we've known for decades came down from Washington just to film, David Gaynor. And he actually had a twist because he's one of the biggest enzyme proponents like we are in the world. But he had this twist that was so cool. He was like, look, just like you were saying with the processed foods, he goes, processed foods aren't just created to make you crave more processed foods, because we talk a lot about that, right? Ghrelin and leptin and that imbalance and all that. He says processed foods are created in a big part to make it so that your body can't digest them, abuses your digestive enzymes, and when they're abused, then it goes to the metabolic enzymes, every process in the body, right? Heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, everything else. And now it starts robbing from the metabolic enzymes, because remember, digestion is number one, and that leads to disease. So processed food in itself, because it stops digestion, leads to disease. And that's not talked about very much. It was mind-blowing to really hear the in-depth knowledge and taking it down to the chemical level of how that happens. But that's just a whole nother level of why what we're trying to do is to protect the metabolic enzymes in the body so that they can do their job and perform all the functions for life and without stress. And we do that by not putting pressure on the digestive enzymes from the pancreas, right? By adding food that's cooked and processed. And we do that, not put the stress there, by eating raw foods or adding back the enzymes when we do. So
Beautiful.
hopefully that kind of comes around,
Yeah,
right?
so that's a great explanation of enzymes. At previous episodes, we've gone into what specific enzymes digest what
Right.
specific foods. I don't think we're going to get into that today. We have some other things to hit, maybe a bit as we
Maybe a
go
little
here.
bit.
But let us know if you want us to do a revamp of that.
Yeah,
That could be fun.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we were talking about diets the other day.
Yes.
Our conversations are different probably than most couples. But we were
Well,
talking.
because our conversations start with one of us saying, "Have you heard about the most recent research study?" Nope. No, I have not. I have not heard of it. Please enlighten me. Actually, it used to be like this big joke, and now it excites me. I love being married to somebody that is constantly learning and teaching, and I think I can be one of his hardest students. So it's really fun. So yeah, so there was
So
another research study.
yeah, and because we're talking about diets, right?
Yes.
And it was the research study was talking about the conclusion, and you hear a lot of people say the best diet is one you stick to, and meaning consistency is the key, which is very, very true. But
Hmm.
the underlying reason for that statement is because most people will end up going to the diets that genetically they digest the best, right?
Right.
And
We've talked about
it's
this.
digestion is the key. And so whether you have a genetic predisposition to not being able, like say you have the SNP to for gluten, right? Some people just don't digest gluten well, or whatever it might be. Or, which is more the case, you have epigenetic problem, meaning just your lifestyle, you've abused different foods over time, and so now you don't digest them as well. Whatever it is, the diet that's best for you, if you don't understand enzymes, is the one that your body will be in less stress with.
Yeah, and we've had this talk. It's so interesting because for some people, all of a sudden they, they're like, no, I'm to a point. I've got to feel better. I've got to lose weight, right? And so instead of following maybe the 21-day challenge and getting rid of a bunch of processed foods and really watching how many calories they actually need in a day, they're like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the carnivore diet, right?
Right.
And I'm going to get rid of all of these carbohydrates, okay? And all of a sudden, here's the thing that's crazy is they do feel better. But why do they feel better? And oftentimes it's for a time that they feel better.
Right.
They feel better because all of a sudden their body isn't under the stress of the nasty and processed carbohydrates that they've been eating, right?
Right.
It's focusing on something else, but eventually it catches up.
Catches up. And that's why most of the time, even some of the top medical doctors that were the proponents of the caveman diet and the carnivore medical doctor, a lot of these people switched. It's because it caught up to them, right? They got that initial relief because they got away from the foods they weren't digesting well, or they're eating the wrong types of those carbohydrates or whatever it might be. So that's a really good point. And it goes to the point, like we were mentioning, is that enzymes are substrate specific. And I know those are kind of big words, but all it really means is enzymes are like a lock and key. One enzyme only digests one food, right? That we're referring to from
Right.
previous episodes. But it's very important to understand that because when you really understand enzymes, you get to understand that there is an ultimate diet. This whole thing, there's no ultimate diet, it's whichever one you sticks to. There's some basis of that of what it takes for you to stick with it to get going, right? So you're doing intermittent fasting, you're doing the carnivore, you're doing whatever it is, and like that. You're doing these things to be able to help your body digest the food better, and you're taking these windows of time, okay? But if you digest your food properly, then you can actually be eating like the healthiest people on the planet for thousands of years have been proven all over the earth. And that is that you get up and you have food, and you have food every few hours throughout the day until you go to bed, and you limit all processed foods and limit actually proteins for the most part, not protein, red meat proteins, things like that. You have them just sparingly. That's the diet. Like people say, there's no ultimate diet. We have the ultimate diet. We know it. It's thousands of years proven. And all the research studies now back it up. So this whole argument that everyone should be doing the carnivore, everyone should do intermittent fasting, everyone should do vegan, that's a bunch of BS. We know the ultimate diet. It's just that why do people get great results on some of these plans and they get so fervent about it? They're like, oh, this is the way to go, and everyone should do this. Everyone should be intermittent. Everyone should be carnivore. Everyone should be plant-based. And all that is because it's what worked best for their system,
Right.
right? And hopefully they can attract people that might be the same. But the ultimate situation is get people to digest their food, eat more raw foods, digest their food, and then they can eat the eating plan from whole foods, consistent food throughout the day, then do a fast every once in a while, a full fast, not just partial each day. And that's the ultimate eating plan. So I kind of got off on a little tangent there, sorry. But
That is shocking.
let's talk about one of the biggest things that we've seen, and we've mentioned it and had episodes just on this, but these are some of the comments we got back that the foods nowadays, that the processing and it's abused our digestive enzymes
Mm-hmm.
and it affects our metabolic enzymes. The body now starts fighting back and it creates the fastest rising group of diseases in the world today called autoimmune diseases.
Yeah. So right now we're going to go through some autoimmune diseases, and we're going to go through like the trigger nutrient,
Okay.
and then like what those foods actually are, and
What food's in that nutrient?
right, and then you can go through the enzyme issue as we do that. So
Okay.
let's start off with number one, celiac disease, and then the trigger nutrient obviously is going to be gluten,
Mhm.
right? So gluten in the larger way is found in wheat, barley, rye. So your breads, your pastas,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
And wheat, barley, and rye type grains. So the bottom line with that is there used to be no such thing as gluten intolerance. And what happened was we started genetically modifying those grains, right? Wheat, barley, and rye, so that that protein, which is just a healthy protein, it's all gluten is. It's a plant protein. But that protein structure got tighter and tighter through the genetic modification so they could withstand the heats and be grown in different places. And the pesticides could be sprayed and it wouldn't be damaged on that protein. And that made it so that a lot of people have a hard time breaking it down. And so
And that's a
that's
big problem
the
in the
cause of
United
celiac
States.
disease.
That's why when some people travel abroad and in like
Mhm.
Italy and or
When we were in
like
Greece
when
and
we were
stuff.
in Greece and Paris, you could eat all of these pastries and pastas there and you feel completely different than when you eat them stateside.
Absolutely. And so celiac disease, number one, as you go into the others, I want to make the point too, though, that you can trace almost every single autoimmune disease, and I'll say every single autoimmune disease back to a food that wasn't digested that caused a trigger. That's really the fastest rising group of diseases on the planet, autoimmune, can all be traced back, each one, to an undigested food. Undigested foods are caused by lack of enzymes. So you can see why enzymes are such a huge deal. So we got
Yeah.
celiac
So we
disease.
have celiac disease. Number two, we're going to go into gout,
Mm.
near and dear to my heart because my father suffered from gout.
Which leads to rheumatoid arthritis and other things too. But yeah.
Yeah, so gout, the trigger nutrient is purines. The larger food, it would be red meat, organ meats, shellfish, sardines,
Right.
all of that. Doug loves to be able to show his party trick, and one of those is he can kind of spot somebody that is suffering from gout by the way they walk because their poor big toe just
Just
suffers.
hurts. And usually you see it in the stomach too with the purine protein. So what a purine protein is, it's a specific amino acid grouping that is in red meat, shellfish, pork,
Right.
right? And some people have a hard time breaking that down, especially if they've abused it over time. But it can be a little genetic or epigenetic. You grew up eating so much of that type of a meat. And the inability to digest creates these purines don't get broken down all the way and they turn into these acids called uric acid. And uric acid is a very heavy crystal. And so it'll flocculate to the furthest place away from the heart, big toe, and that'll start hurting. But they'll also get, the stomach usually in that, not always, but a lot of the time it's really easy to pick out. But gout is one of those things celiac disease, once it's destroyed all of the gut, it's tough. It was really tough, right? But with gout, I haven't found anyone that they wouldn't change their diet, get off all purine proteins, and start taking a ton of the protein digestive enzymes like in acute, that they won't cure gout. Haven't found anyone in
No, that's
25 years.
true, except there's a period of time that you have to go through and understand that you are removing those crystals and there might be some pain as you're going through that. I remember that was a real big discussion with my dad when he was alive, trying to make him understand, no, we realize it's going to hurt a little bit as these are trying to get out of your body, but stubborn old man. Okay.
Well, the thing is too is if you didn't exercise in that, it wouldn't hurt as much, but exercising speeds up the process. So it's kind of like that pain in the moment, but it
Right.
speeds up the process to get rid of the gout.
Right.
And that's a really good point there, which gout leads to also rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah,
that we
so
were
that's
talking
our
about,
next one,
right?
3, which is rheumatoid arthritis. Same thing, purines,
But other
undigested,
undigested proteins, right?
other undigested proteins. So we talked about it: beef, pork, or even inflammatory proteins in dairy.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the difference with rheumatoid. Gout is very, very specific to those specific proteins, right? Your pork and your shellfish and the red meat. But rheumatoid arthritis is proteins pretty much in general, and it can
Okay.
be from undigestion of proteins. And that one's a little tougher too because it really deteriorates the joints at a fast rate. And seen a lot of people slow that down. The very beginning stages, eliminate it. Me included on that one.
You know
Um,
what's
hmm,
wild?
what?
My dad's mother had terrible arthritis, and I never put the two
Yeah,
together, the relationship between arthritis and gout. Like, duh.
protein.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So not only was it epigenetics, it was probably in his poor little DNA.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so number 4, we're going to go into lactose intolerance. A lot of people can relate to this one, right? And the trigger nutrient, obviously, is lactose.
Well over 90% of the population are somewhat lactose intolerant.
So the larger food would be dairy, so your milks, your cheeses, your ice creams, and I think a big trigger is ice cream for people with this one, or really heavily processed cheeses.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of people don't look at lactose intolerant as an autoimmune disease, but it really leads to the largest autoimmune disease. And it's very easy to fix in the stage of lactose intolerance because you just need to add the lactase. The simple, story with that is raw milk. And you drink raw milk, and raw milk contains lactase enzymes in it. Raw milk, once it's pasteurized and heated, it lasts longer on the shelf, but that's the main enzyme that's destroyed is
Right.
lactase. And what's funny is the other day I was talking about the importance of raw milk, and it was online in the Facebook group, and someone posted a picture, and the picture was a vending machine. I want to say Spain, but it was some other country. And in the vending machine, Netherlands, in the vending machine, it was raw milk. Like you could buy raw milk in the vending machine.
Uh-oh, we're moving to the Netherlands,
And we're moving,
everybody.
and it was the most amazing thing because now raw milk's looked at as this terrible thing, when in reality, raw milk, because it contains enzymes, is the best thing in the world. And we'll have to have an episode on that because one of my mentors actually took raw milk and E. coli and regular milk and mixed them and showed what happens. Because a lot of people say there's bacteria in raw milk.
Right. So, interesting.
All right.
Okay, so which leads us into type 1 diabetes.
Big one.
The trigger nutrient casein, milk protein,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
I hear people say that different. How do you say it?
What?
Casein.
Casein?
Some people say
Caseinate.
it- Okay, yeah.
Caseinate.
So the larger food obviously is dairy products, cow's milk.
Mhm. Any type of dairy.
Yeah.
So dairy contains two proteins, whey and casein, and we're big fans of whey. And casein was this protein, the other protein that's very, very hard to digest.
Right.
And it was a waste product. And then some marketer came along and says, hey, you know what? We'll just call it slow digesting. We won't call it, like hard to digest. And you should take it at night before you go to bed so that it time releases through the, all this stuff. And now you go buy these big, 5-gallon cans of casein and people will take it. And it's the stupidest thing in the world because if you don't digest casein, it'll usually get broken down to 7 amino acids. And those 7 amino acids, actually are really, really known in the industry, actually have the same structure as the islets in the pancreas where you make insulin. And so what's happening is the body starts attacking that casein. And again, it's not what you do once is what you do consistently.
Right.
So you have dairy consistently, right? These things. And after a while, the new white blood cells start attacking that casein and like, wait, this looks just like that. And it's the islets and starts attacking itself. And now all of a sudden we can't produce insulin.
Interesting.
Type 1
That one-
diabetes,
That
from
one's crazy.
all from
And
not digesting casein or dairy.
And I would say that the amount of people that we've seen be diagnosed with type 1 diabetes later in life has tripled in the last
At
10
least.
years. Like you didn't really see that often. If you were diagnosed, you were diagnosed early in life, but that's become something and I think that would be Doug's
Yeah, that's
what you would pinpoint it on.
absolutely pinpointed on. And the research is clear. I think we mentioned before that if you look at the countries with the highest incidence of diabetes, it correlates to the highest amount of milk consumption or dairy consumption. And so a lot of people, again, think we're against dairy. I'm a huge fan of dairy. Raw. It has to have the enzymes.
Oh,
It
dang,
comes
I was
back
about
to
to
the
say let's get
enzymes.
some Dairy Queen.
No, not that dairy. Mm. No,
Okay.
no raw.
So
The
the
gluten.
next one, number 6, is Hashimoto's thyroiditis.
Yeah, this is not talked about very much. I don't think we've really talked about Hashimoto's disease from the autoimmune, standpoint,
No, I don't think we have.
because we talked about, you had it,
Yeah.
right?
I had markers for it. I was never officially diagnosed.
She had the exact blood work for Hashimoto's. So,
And I guess my doctor did look at it, but
um,
so gluten or soy, right?
isoflavones. So really, this one's tougher because the literature will lead to, oh, gluten, isoflavonoid, it's a protein. This is more kind of like the arthritis one, where it's overall if you don't digest a protein well, it very easily can turn into it. And one of the biggest problems is synthetic sugars. The structure in them will mimic that.
There we are.
And a lot of I caught heck for this when I first started teaching this, and now the research bears it out a lot more. But we're talking about these synthetically created foods that the body can't break down, and the thyroid really taking the brunt of that to a point where it becomes too active, right? And that it's another one of those things where you measure an enzyme that shouldn't be elevated, thyroid peroxidase, and the more elevated it is, the more highest level of Hashimoto's you have.
Right.
But again, once you take away the trigger, in your case, sucralose, right?
Right.
Right, or whatever it might be, digest it. Make sure you take the enzymes in to relieve the pressure.
Yeah, well, what's wild too is it hasn't been an issue again, really. There's been times where we've seen the number kind of start to rise,
Yep.
and we've had a talk, and it's like, ooh, is there anything that we could pull back on? Is there something? Have I reintroduced, some synthetic sugars or whatever?
Yeah.
But we have. I mean, that's been how long now? A
Years.
decade?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Okay, so the next one is multiple sclerosis.
Not talked about enough.
And the trigger nutrient, myelin-like proteins are gluten, right?
Mm-hmm. So what type of foods are those?
So we're talking about wheat.
Wheat, but the bigger picture is the inflammatory proteins, right? What's an inflammatory protein?
Tell us.
Any protein without enzymes.
Okay.
So what determines whether you end up getting one disease versus another when it's just overall maybe not digesting proteins? Okay, and a lot of that then comes to your genetics, right? What would lead to one versus another? There's very specific autoimmune diseases like celiac disease, specific only to gluten, right? Things like that. Your gout, very specific to purine proteins. Diabetes, very specific to dairy, casein, things like that. But there are some of these autoimmune diseases, like we're mentioning right now, that really do come down to, okay, there's this huge issue. And where does it go? Well, then it could be a genetic factor that causes that, whereas multiple sclerosis or something like that.
Okay, so Crohn's disease, the trigger nutrient is complex carbohydrates or proteins. So that larger food would be highly processed grains or high protein diets, like with red meat.
Yeah, Crohn's is one of those that we've seen tremendous improvement in people that have even come to us before we even helped them and just said, hey, I changed my diet. I started eating a lot more whole food based carbohydrates and proteins, and it got a ton better. They started using a lot of the complete nutrition powder, things like that, that is a very highly digestible carbohydrate protein mix. And all of a sudden they discover for themselves, the healthier they eat on more digestible foods, the better, but they wanted the extra level. And the extra level was they got a big relief from eating whole foods versus processed, but there's another level of enzymes.
Right.
The ones they added them back, then they were able to completely cure it according to them.
Yeah, so we were going over the top 9, and the 9th is psoriasis. The trigger nutrient, gluten, or what's that one?
Arachidonic acid.
Whew, I think that's a new one for me, my love. Larger food, wheat-based foods, or fatty meats.
Fatty meats. And so it's the fats within the meat. And a lot of people don't have a problem with the digestion of the meat, but they're eating the fatter meats. They go out to the fancier restaurants and they're really
like
more
the really tasty steaks.
Yeah, there you go. And so there's an acid in that called arachidonic acid, and a lot of people have a problem with that arachidonic acid because their body's already acidic from drinking soda and a lifestyle and too much stress, right? A lot of people that that actually make up the most negative possibilities, and that have this level of stress that releases a lot of cortisol. When you have a lot of cortisol in the body, you're worried about an event that you can't control. Then what happens with that is the body will say, okay, I'm already a little more acidic, and then you bring in this arachidonic acid from the diet, and then it can trigger psoriasis, where the body's trying to get rid of this acid because it's critical, gets rid of it, or you're just going to, a body will shut down, age, have major issues. And so it starts taking it out the largest organ of the body, which is the skin. And
I
many
know how you
times,
can remember that.
okay, how's that?
Arachidonic sounds like a dinosaur. A dinosaur's big,
Mhm.
largest organ in the body. Large dinosaur, arachidonic.
I like it. You'll probably never forget it. And I never laugh at people's what we think, what stories we create to remember things, because I have some crazy ones to try to remember things. So that works actually really well. But just remember that the body wants to take food that's non-digested, and if it can't break it down, it wants to get it out of the body because it can cause major problems. And many times it's diarrhea, many times it's throwing up through the skin,
Rash.
psoriasis, rashes, and the majority of the time it's a non-digestion of foods. Take a look at your diet, cut out the processed foods, processed sugars, chemicals, number one. Number two, then digest even more by taking Digestamil with each meal. And in between, when you take Digestamil between meals, you're digesting the digested foods that are already in the system. And the majority of people, that fixes the problem because you're helping the body get the nutrients from the food now. And that's actually why we keep changing the formula, because more processed foods, right? The
Right.
farming practices get worse, the glyphosate, all those things. So we have to keep adding and actually growing new enzymes to be able to fix a lot of these issues. But the key is eat more raw food,
Yeah. Eat more raw food. Whatever diet you follow, make sure you get the cleanest forms of the food you're going to eat.
100%. And so hopefully that helps. Let us know. Hopefully you're committed to eat more raw food, chew it a bunch, add back enzymes every time you eat. And if you do have concerns about some type of a digestion issue, indigestion is the first sign of it. When we're talking even about these types of conditions, autoimmune and that, then take enzymes between meals, and it can help a lot. And if you want to stick only to foods, eat a lot of papaya, pineapple, things like that have a lot of these enzymes in them. But extracting the enzymes out and taking them by themselves is just that much more powerful. So hopefully this helps in your journey to optimal health.
This guy is Doug the Formulator.
And this is Miss Natural Olympia Hilary. Take care. Keep chewing
Literally.
with enzymes.
Keep chewing.